We are back. It is time for another episode of Prospect Corner, and I have conned yet another incredibly smart prospect person to come and talk to me about teenagers. That is what's coming up today on Locked On Blue Jackets.
Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets. We are of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first watch of the day. If you have followed me over to YouTube, then I appreciate you for stopping on by. But today, Blue Jackets, they won last night, which is very exciting. But unfortunately, they lost the 7 in a row before that. They're sliding down the standings, but that means that they're sliding up the draft rankings, which is very exciting. I know I personally have been keeping my eye on Tankathon. So I thought let's do another couple of prospect profiles. So I've got Sam McGilligan here of McKeens Hockey to come and talk to me. Today we're going to be talking about someone I'm very excited about, and I think that Sam is very excited about as well. We're going to talk about David Jiricek, who is pretty high on my list, I think is safe to say. But if you could tell me just a little bit about Jiricek, what can we what should we expect from him when we see him play?
David Jiricek is going to be a monster, most likely. He is, that word summarizes his play completely. He just goes 100% all the time. He is just physically annihilating guys who come within his range. He is just distributing pucks everywhere, looking for the craziest play he can sometimes. He is a special breed of defenseman, and very clearly, in my eyes, the best defenseman in this draft.
Yeah, I kind of, when this season started, I just kind of assumed that we were going to draft forwards for the next 3 years because our defense core was so good. And then we lost Seth Jones, who, I mean, you know, your opinion may vary on whether we're a better team without him or not, but obviously losing him was a big blow to our defensive depth. We lost a ton of other guys. Ryan Murray went, Marcus Nudavara went to make room for Pierre-Luc Dubois, who didn't end up staying, but that's a whole other thing. But now I'm looking at this draft and I'm thinking defense could be the way to go. And looking at kind of the top 10 to 15-ish, maybe the top 20 draft players, if the Blue Jackets suddenly go on a tear, there's really only one defenseman that I personally am like really excited about, and I think he is someone that Blue Jackets fans will enjoy. I think he's not really like any other player that we have on the team. No. I don't think. But is there like? I tend to ask this question, and I know that it doesn't always kind of translate across. But does he have like a comparable in the NHL? Like, who in the NHL today would you say is most like Jiricek's game?
Will Scouch gave me a really good one the other day because we were just talking about him, and he said Mikhail Sergachev, and I think that's a pretty accurate one, especially Mikhail Sergachev back in 2016. He had a ridiculously high ceiling coming out of the draft. He still turned into quite a good player. He's a quality top 4 guy, but Jiricek has that similar ceiling where he could be a top 4 guy like Sergachev. He could go higher to the point where he's a first pairing defenseman. If I'm betting on someone becoming a Norris contender from this draft, it would be David Jiricek. He is absolutely sensational. He's so much fun to watch too. He brings such a unique element. I have dogs barking. Sorry. He brings such a unique element that no other defenseman really does. There are other D that I like. I like Simon Nemec quite a bit, just not as much as other people do. But I do see the value in Simon Nemec. He's a great player. Seamus Casey, I'm very high on. I really like Kevin Korchinski. I really like Kallio Delius. I think those 4 are really, really, really good defensemen. But I think David Jiricek is a clear tier above all of them. He's the type of guy who can just dominate the ice when he's out there everywhere. 5v5 in all 3 zones. Great transitionally. Okay. He can be great defensively. I should amend this. Jiricek right now is a bit of a mixed bag. When you watch his check play, you can see him, this go 100% mentality, just cause disaster to happen for his team. He can be so out of position or really try and just create the craziest play when simpler stuff would have worked out. But it's easier to refine a player, I think, than it is to make them, like, to teach them how to go all out. I think Jiricek has enough method to his madness, and a lot of it looks like experimentation because he's 18 years old. I mean, he's extremely talented player in a pro league. He's gonna, mess around. They do that sometimes. They're trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. It's a process. It takes time, and you can definitely see he's still a work in progress. But when the work is complete 5 years from now, David Jiricek is my bet on being the best defenseman from this draft. He's got a highest ceiling as anybody in this class.
Yeah, that's something I've kind of been looking at as I do. I think this is the 10th or 11th prospect that I've looked at now. And something that I've been kind of talking about with the prospect guys is the idea of, do you draft someone who maybe isn't as polished, but has a really high ceiling? Or do you go for more of a safe bet? Do you go for the high risk, high reward player, or do you go for someone who exactly what you're going to get, but what you're going to get is, maybe a middle six guy?
Yeah. For me, I'm always on the high risk, high reward thing, but it's about understanding what risk you're taking on. There are some players who have exceptional tools, but they don't really seem to understand how they all put together. Drafting and developing that is really, 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 really hard. And it's not a given that you can make it all work out. There's a wide range of possibilities, and very few of them end up leading to superstardom. But a player like Jiricek, where there is like a clear method to his madness, same with another super high ceiling player in this draft, Brad Lambert. The two of them have extremely annoying things about the way they play right now that could really frustrate scouts and have them lower on them. But I see they're trying something. There's a methodology behind their decision making that you can kind of pick up on and read the patterns over enough games, and you can tell that they they read the game extremely well. It's that level of reading the game that kind of makes them just screw around sometimes and do some funny things, and sometimes do some things that make you want to pull your hair out. It's kind of the nature of dealing with like world class talents who are still just becoming legal age to drink, right? Like that's kind of just like they're extremely good, but you can't look at them like fully developed professional players yet, right?
Yeah, and I feel like you see that in the NHL as well. People have been losing
Oh,
their minds over that
absolutely.
Trevor Zegras goal from last
Yeah,
week.
yeah. That see, like that
Like,
type of stuff, right?
but I love stuff like that, and it does. It's right. You're right. It's like you can kind of afford to mess around because you are good. And I haven't seen a ton of Jiricek's like play and in sustain. I've watched a bunch of highlights and like I've seen a couple of like periods of games. But what I've seen from Jiricek is, yeah, he's gonna make mistakes. He's 18 years old. He's a baby. But when I have noticed him make mistakes, he does his best to fix them.
Yep. He
He's a guy
recognizes when
that
he makes a
will.
bad play like immediately. Like when he sends a bad pass, he doesn't chase it up, or he knows immediately, okay, abandon that plan, reroute myself. What can I do to mitigate the damage that I just caused? Pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And you see kind of, I think, less players with, I guess, a lower hockey IQ, I think, would fall into kind of chasing the puck.
Yep.
But if you watch him, he almost like heads it off at the pass almost. And it's really interesting to see because, I don't know how much attention you pay to the Blue Jackets, but their defense this season has not been very good. And there has been a lot of mistakes. And then a lot of trying to fix the mistakes, but like I say, just kind of if they make a bad pass, then barreling straight for where they've made the pass to, as opposed to trying to course correct. So
Yeah.
it's been a tough season on defense for the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, and Jiricek's gonna have moments where he puts his blinders on. There's no denying that. A big part of it is less about when he's making bad passes and more when he's made the mental decision that he wants to launch this man 10 seats up in the stands, because he will go for him. There are times where I've seen Jiricek just chase the body with zero respect for the puck, before they've even crossed the blue line when he's defending the rush. Like he's just straight up annihilated somebody at center ice, but didn't shut down a passing lane in the process. And now the puck is on a 2 or 3v1, and their defenseman is not even in the defensive zone yet. Jiricek has to have kind of some of this stuff really dialed down, and it's going to be a learning process because you don't want to kill it entirely. It's that same passion, that kind of like that same I will just destroy them at all cost mentality that fuels so much of what works, not just with the physical play, but how he hounds and pressures people defensively and the routes he takes around the defensive zone. How he transitions the puck up ice is just like go, go, go. He knows he can switch up the pace and tempo, which is mandatory if you're going to reach NHL stardom, but he's still really good at the hard part, which is doing it at the fastest pace. It's easier to teach. Again, it's easier to teach someone to slow things down and say, hey, you don't need to always go 100% up ice when you're transitioning the puck, than it is to go, okay, dude, you need to speed up sometimes. This is kind of getting a little ridiculous. That's what Seamus Casey has as an issue. He's like the complete opposite. He's got all the talent in the world to also contend for best defenseman in this draft, but he just sometimes is so inactive that it's frustrating. You can see him, and he's just like looking at awesome plays like in front of him, and you're just like, I know you can do this. Come on. Like, no, you're like one of 3 defensemen who can. Why are you just watching play unfold? So I guess it's a pick your poison thing, but Jiricek's absolute insanity towards his approach to the game is just what draws me to him. It's not often that like a player's intensity is something that stands out for me, but with him, it's one of the things I love the most, and I think it's what any fan base of his will love because he is going to do some hilarious things in the NHL. He's going to be on a lot of highlight reels in probably both ways. He's going to give the other team a couple of highlight reels in the process by accident.
Yeah, I guess that all you've got to hope for with that kind of player is that it balances out. You know?
And a good development plan is like it's so stereotypical and it's the easiest response, but it's true. Like you can only do so much as the scout. Once he's drafted, it's 5 to 7 years of development to see what he becomes. He can become this. It's just who develops him and how. Columbus has taken a few prospects where I've just like been like, that's not my pick. But you guys have had fantastic development with said prospects and are fixing the errors that I had with them. There's very clearly a plan in mind when a player is selected within this organization. Cole Sillinger, who I absolutely adored last year, is developed quite well as the season has progressed, and I thought he would be great 3 years from now. He's already in the NHL and showing that he can play here and that he's an NHL player, and that blows my mind. And I want to attribute a lot of that to the Blue Jackets because there's a lot of organizations where I don't think Sillinger finds the same level of success as an 18-year-old. It's not
Yeah,
about just opportunity, but coaching and how they work with him behind the scenes as well. And they're doing well with that.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see kind of as I've paid more attention to prospects over the past kind of couple of years, it's so interesting. There are a lot of prospects that people have drafted. So Igor Chinikov is the biggest one for me. You know, Jarmo Kekalainen drafted him a couple of years ago, and literally everyone was like, "Who?" I threw all of my draft prep on Hendrix Lapierre out the window because he was who I was sure the Blue Jackets were going to pick. He ended up going one pick later, but a lot of people look at the way that Jarmo Kekalainen draft and are like, "Oh, I wouldn't do it that way." And then, like you say, they turn into surprisingly good players. I was really happy with the Cole Sillinger pick last draft. I fully did not expect it. I was like, okay, cool. He's going to go to camp. He's going to go to Traverse City. He's going to have a really good showing. And then he's going to go back to Medicine Hat, probably. And
yeah, that's what I thought too.
Like, yeah, a couple of I spoke to Jared Brown of Draft Pro Hockey about him, and he was like, yeah, he's probably got a year, maybe 2 before he's NHL ready. But I don't know what he did over the summer, but he turned up to training camp and immediately was like, there was a really good quote from Brad Larson, the head coach, where he basically was like, I sat down with this kid and was like, I keep trying to find a reason to get rid of you, and I'm just not seeing one. And obviously he ended up making the opening night roster, and then he's been there all year, and I'm thrilled that he's had such a good season. I can only hope that the rest of our prospects develop that way.
Yeah, I know this is a Jiricek episode, but I absolutely love Sillinger. Sillinger was one of my favorite prospects last year. So if I get a chance to talk about Cole Sillinger really quick, I want to talk about Cole Sillinger really quick, if that's okay.
I
um,
will talk about Cole Sillinger forever. Please go.
okay, great. Cole Sillinger's draft year tape pissed me off the first time I watched it because he was such a selfish player until I started watch because I didn't watch his first few games of Sioux Falls. It was like the 5th or 6th game with them that I watched first. And then I was just annoyed and I kind of like went off of the player for a bit and then I revisited. I watched his first 3 and he was a much more open passer in those games and he was making like good reads and making good passes, not too frequently, but he was capable of doing them. But then the Sioux Fall guys would just mess up the play. And I was just like, okay, well, I can see why now you are shooting the puck a lot more when there's open passes because you have a ridiculous shot and people aren't burying your plays. And then all year long, he just like his shot, it feels like a glitch. Like he just teleports pucks. He can drag the puck for it feels like 2 or 3 seconds straight and still release it at any point. Pinpoint accuracy, zero sacrifice to speed. It was crazy. Of course, he's going to use that in the USHL all day long. I was writing a scouting report for him and I was really frustrated. So I went back and I watched his D-1 tape with Medicine Hat. He was nothing but a playmaker. He was making consistently high level reads all the time, just threading needles. Some of them were insane, like solves 2 or 3 layers of defense with one time, creates a high danger chance out of nothing. And I was just like, what the hell? This is the same player. And now he has that glitch of a shot. And now he's also extremely comfortable using it. Like he obviously wasn't as a rookie in the WHL. And all year long, I was thinking, like, if he fuses these, that's got to be a top 5 guy, right? But I didn't have the video evidence of him fusing. I didn't know if he was capable of playing both the shooter and the playmaker. I moved him in the top 10. I then became a coward and right at the end of the season took him out and left him at 11 and was like, you might drastically outperform this. And here he is in the NHL, perfectly fusing that shooting passing mentality and an improved skater. He is going to be a monster. He's going to be an absolute monster.
Yeah,
If the
like
COVID season, yeah, if the pandemic doesn't happen, I think that and he stays in Medicine Hat and he just like adds that shooting to what he already was and plays with a team he's confident in. What does he do last year? Probably goes where Ken Johnson went to you guys
yeah,
instead.
yeah. I'm biased, obviously, but
So am I.
I'm a big Cole Sillinger fan. I have loved getting to watch him develop as a player. Like at the start of the season, I was like, oh, okay, he's only made the NHL because the Blue Jackets are bad. I don't know that he makes the NHL on a different team that is not quite as bad necessarily, but you can see him grow and develop as a player, and you can see, okay, in 3 years, like let's put Kent Johnson on his wing and literally like anyone else on his other wing and just watch him go. Like I think in 2 years' time, that's going to be just so much fun. I was waiting for the Senators to draft him 10th overall, and then
So was
obviously
I.
they didn't do that.
They
And I
did
was
not.
like, okay, well, Arizona's not going to do anything with the 11th pick, so I think we might have got our guy. And yeah, super excited for him to keep developing. But
Yeah, I remember looking at Gunther and Sillinger being on the board and going like, well, Columbus can't lose here. Like no matter what happens, Columbus is going to win this. 12th overall, you shouldn't have been able to get either of those guys, I think. Sillinger at least makes sense. Gunther slipping past 10 really surprised me, but
yeah,
in hindsight, although I had Gunther ahead at the time and also would have made the same pick, I would have had a gut feeling about Sillinger, that same thing. Like, oh, if you fuse those two, it's looking like the right pick. Sillinger is definitely the early pick for how did he slip so far in the draft. Even though all the reasons made sense, it's just one of those like it just worked out. It happens sometimes, and Columbus got him. That's a
yeah,
good.
sometimes.
It's great, and they're going to develop him beautifully.
Yeah, we seem to have accidentally developed quite a good prospect pool. Like I feel like a couple of years ago, all of the prospect reports were like, "Oh, Columbus has like the 26th or the 27th best prospect pool," and now I think this year, was it Down Goes Brown did his prospect rankings, and they were like, "Yeah, Columbus has like the 6th best prospect pool in the NHL," and I was like, "Yeah, that feels right." But in terms of In terms of adding Jiricek to it, if we can get back to
Oh yeah,
no, I
absolutely.
mean, I will talk about Cole Sillinger literally forever. I love him. I think he's just so good. He's so much fun to watch. But Jiricek, where do you see him going in the draft? Like, where is he kind of on your ranking? Because obviously Columbus has Chicago's first round pick this year as
Um,
well. So
for me, he is. Yeah, I just want to double. He was 4th overall, and he is 4th overall, but he's in a tier that goes 2 to 4. So mine is Shane Wright on his own at number 1, Brad Lambert, Logan Cooley, and David Jiricek in a little group. I guess the second tier from 2 to 4. I would take any of them in any of those positions and be fine. My preference goes to Lambert, and I would need some convincing to take one of Cooley or Jiricek above him. I love Brad Lambert till the end of time. He's probably going to Columbus or San Jose. This was actually my I kind of been thinking this all year that it's one of those two will take him. But David Jiricek is, I don't see him slipping past top 5 in real life or on my rankings. Sometimes like I have a philosophy that doesn't always align with the NHL sometimes. I always have like if I'm in charge of the organization and I'm developing these players, what can I turn these players into kind of outlook. And then I look for the high risk, minimal risk, but the high reward guys, the high upside guys, and then the ones who I think have the intelligence to actually play at the pace that a top 6 NHL role looks for. That's kind of like what I am. Most of my top 10 is pretty much filled with. Most of my top 15 is kind of what I go for with that. But Jiricek is very, very clearly going to be top 5 for both me and the NHL. The NHL will love him. I actually think he's going to go second in the NHL.
yeah, I have. It makes sense that you say that about Jiricek and Brad Lambert going to one of Columbus or San Jose, because I've noticed that, well, Columbus, obviously Kekalainen loves to draft Europeans.
Yeah.
He loves his Finnish players. And he also, if you look at some of the choices, so Elvis Merzlikins is one, high risk, high reward goalie. They had to make a choice, him or Korpisalo. They chose Elvis, who I think is less consistent than Korpisalo, but has a much higher ceiling. And then obviously their hand was kind of forced with Pierre-Luc Dubois, but getting Patrick Laine. Patrick Laine, I
Yep.
think, is the most high risk, high reward player in the NHL, and clearly at the minute he's high reward. But I could see Kekalainen looking at a guy like Lambert, who, again, I think a lot of people have talked about red flags, but I think I like, and I'm not super up on prospects, but a lot of the red flags seem to me like stuff that can be ironed out by
Yep.
NHL development, NHL coaching, and just not being 18. So
Yeah, he needs a lot of video sessions and things like that, but I don't like the way Brad Lambert plays without the puck tells me everything about how intelligent he is. The sheer amount of times a game, and I do this quite literally every game I've ever watched Brad Lambert, where I've seen him get open, and if someone passed him the puck, he's immediately in a position to make a play, regardless of what zone they're in or where they are. And his teammate doesn't identify him there. He hasn't even looked up yet. Sometimes he's so. I think he reads pretty far ahead of Liga play, and he doesn't play on either of his teams. Don't have line mates that are reading the speed that he plays at, because he'll get the puck and immediately give it to somebody in the tiniest window and dash right to open space to get it back, and they don't give it back to him, and you can't blame him for not getting the puck back. He's in the spot, and then when he finally does get the puck, 3 guys are covered on his team, so he's like, all right, I'm just doing this myself. And then he goes in 1v4s and he loses the puck. And then everyone's like, look at how bad he is. And I'm just thinking, look how frustrated he is.
yeah, that sounds like a perfect Columbus player, honestly.
That's why I think he sounds like a Columbus player to a T. It's almost goes back to the Cole Sillinger thing. It's like, look how frustrated he is with his line mates last year, and look what happens when he goes up a level. He's a better passer in the NHL than he was in the USHL. That doesn't sound like it should be true, but it's true. That's what happens when smarter players play down a level. They just kind of get frustrated sometimes and just develop a selfish play style. When you're in the USHL, you can still score a ton of points like Sillinger, but if you're in Liga, you're going to have a really ugly stat line and people are going to think you suck. And that's the Brad Lambert's story.
Yeah, he's going to be. I think he's primed to be kind of the Lucas Raymond of the draft. I think of everyone being like, how did this guy fall to wherever he fell? If he goes anything lower than like
I think
third.
he's the Eklund of the draft. That's what I
Okay,
keep kind of
fair. Yeah.
thinking he is. I mean, I definitely think Eklund was a better prospect. Eklund was insane. Him going 7th is like the most ridiculous draft fall I can remember in recent memory. But Lambert very well could be there past 10. And I think a team is going to see it. A team is going to draft him. And if it's the right one, within 2 to 3 years, we're going to be watching him barzell around the NHL. And they're going to be like, well, we might have messed this one up a little bit.
Who could have known this was going to happen?
Who could have known the fastest, most dynamic, skilled player in the draft who clearly reads play ahead of his teammates could read play in the NHL and play like a fast, skilled guy? That's crazy. That's crazy talk.
Yeah. So, for people who want to learn more about Prospect or want to yell with you about Cole Sillinger, where can people like legitimately? I don't want you to think this is hyperbole. I will talk about Cole Sillinger literally all day.
That's
But
great. So will I.
if people want to learn a little bit more about Prospect or follow some of your Prospect work, where can they find you and your Prospect work?
Okay, well, I am at Sam_McGilligan, McGilligan on Twitter. I have a Substack, which is just Sam McGilligan without an underscore, at .substack.com. There hasn't been a bunch of content on there yet. That's coming. I'm kind of just waiting until the perfect time in the draft season to release it all, because I wrote a bunch of stuff that I really like, and if I release it and no one reads it because it's like March, I will be sad. So I'm trying to like time this right, and I think I might be getting a little too late with it, but it's coming, I promise. And you can follow McKeens Hockey as well, because that's where a lot of my work goes, along with the McKeens video team, where I work with Will Scouch and Greg Revac. And we have a ton of content coming up as well. Again, just waiting for the right time to start releasing it, right? But there's a big old content dump coming in the next time. So it's the perfect time to jump in and start seeing all this stuff now. Because come April, the world starts paying attention to prospects once their team was officially eliminated from the playoffs. And then all the viewership just ticks up like crazy. So everyone, not just me, but everyone's probably going to be doing content dumps right about now.
Yeah, I've been trying to get ahead of the curve, because I was like,
Yeah.
the playoffs, and I'm going to get as many prospect profiles as I can. But I will definitely be checking out the stuff over at McKeens and on your Substack as soon as it exists. So thank you for coming to talk to me about your
Thank you for having me, man. Awesome.